Hello and welcome to My Career So Far with Kira and Josh, the first episode of 2025. Happy New Year, Kira.
Happy New Year.
This week on the podcast, we have got the absolutely brilliant Paul Hayes, who's currently presenting on Magic.
He has had such an interesting career. He's been here, there and everywhere is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, including going abroad for some time, which you'll hear about.
We've had one abroad guest, but not in different countries.
Yes, very interesting. In the radio industry, that's what they call
A
tease. Well, here it is. It is Paul Hayes on My Career So Far.
My Career So Far.
Paul Hayes, hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
All good. It's Friday.
It's always a good time of the week, a Friday.
Of course, it is. It might not be when... Is this going out on a Friday or a different day? I might have ruined somebody's day if it's not a Friday when you're playing it.
It'll go out on a Saturday, but it's
A Saturday?
fine.
Okay, that's fine. That's right, isn't it? Even better.
I feel like before we start, we need to just say that we were originally planning to call you on the Wednesday, but technical issues that were really painful stopped that from happening. So thank you for giving us your time once again. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all. No problem at all. We got there, didn't we?
Eventually.
We did. Right, so let's start with how did you first fall in love with radio?
I started listening to it when I was probably about 10 or 11. And of course, that was at a time when there was, I think it was actually at that point, 4 TV channels. That was it. So, yeah, I know, horrifying. That was it, 4 terrestrial TV channels. Channel 5 hadn't even started at that point. So there weren't tons of options for entertainment or anything else. So it was radio, and it started with Radio 1, and I came across Steve Wright, who I thought was just absolutely amazing, and always did. He was one of my absolute favourites, and I just got blown away with the energy and all of it, the music, the production, the jingles, the characters, this world that he managed to create, and I just found that connection to that through him. And then it sort of moved on to I started sort of flicking around, because that's what you used to have to do, with one of those FM radios that you used to have to actually sort of move things to find things. So I found Capital, which was also different to Radio 1, but blew me away in other ways with the energy and the lots of music and great music, and that all really impacted me with Capital. And then I flicked around a bit more and came across sort of Southern FM, which is where I lived, and Invicta in Kent, and all these sort of local stations, and just started to listen a lot and started to record a lot of radio and listen back and sort of figure out what it was they were doing and how they were doing it and what they were talking about, and just sort of started to really really fall in love with it and just become a bit obsessed with it, really.
So after that, what was your sort of first radio job?
So I started doing hospital radio when I was about 15. I think you had to be 16 to get in, but somehow I managed to blag it in when I was about 15. And that was at Crawley Hospital. And it was run by a guy called Nick Pitts, who is in radio now and actually works for Bauer, and runs Jazz FM and Magic Classical. And he was a great guy. He went off to Radio 1 and did some great stuff. So it was a very professional hospital radio station. It was always run pretty well, and so that was quite a good start. And I did more TV stuff actually before I did any proper radio. So I did this. It was a young version of a program called Good Morning with Anne and Nick, which was on BBC One. And they were looking for young presenters to come in and do different slots. So they had the 2 main presenters, and then there were different sort of feature presenters like Showbiz, and I did the consumer slot. So I ended up getting a consumer slot on BBC One, which was when I was about 17, I think I was at that point, which was absolutely terrifying, because it's first proper experience was live on BBC One, which is quite a thing to sort of get your head around, really. but it went really well. James Corden was the showbiz presenter on that, so it was quite a nice experience. We stayed. It was done at Pebble Mill, which I think they've knocked down since, but that was in Birmingham. And so we all had like a week in Birmingham. We did rehearsals and we all stayed in the same hotel and had dinner. And it was just a really nice experience, that. So that was the first sort of proper thing I did, sort of before I ever really got on the radio properly at that point. And then I sent that to the head of Children's BBC, and he got me in a couple of times. I did a couple of interviews, and I did an audition in the studio to do the continuity bits in between programs on Children's BBC. Got quite close with that one, but I think I was a bit too sarcastic, which they had to point out that children don't really understand sarcasm, so that probably wasn't my most perfect role, maybe. But and then it was university. And after a year at university, I sent it wouldn't have been an email, it would have been a letter. I think it would have been an actual letter. I sent to a new radio station at that point. That was 1997, and there were lots of these sort of small radio stations that were popping up that got licenses to cover quite small areas, and this one was Dover and Folkestone in Kent, and it was called Neptune Radio. So I sent a letter to them, and he got me down for a week to sort of a sort of work experience type thing. But I ended up doing a show while I was there, and then they offered me a job, and I thought, well, I was at university doing media studies, and I've just been offered a job doing a media job. So I thought, well, I might as well go and do the job. So I left university after a year, and went down to Kent and did, I think it was about a year and a half at Neptune. But it was a brilliant start because I was half journalist, half my day was running the newsroom in the afternoon, and then the other half was doing the evening show. And actually, that was a really, 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 really good way to start. By doing some journalism at the same time and learning a bit about news and the journalistic side, and then doing a sort of more fun kind of evening show. It was the best of both worlds, really, to start. And it was a really great guy who was running it, called Mark Browning, who has done phenomenal things. He was running ITN at one point, and he later was my boss again at Heart. When I was at Heart, he was deputy PD at Heart. So ran into him again with that, which was good. So it was a really good start with Neptune. It got things off to quite a good start, I think.
I mean, when you're saying it's about half journalism, half radio, it sums us two quite up nicely, I think.
Well, yeah, because I study journalism and Josh studies TV and radio, so that was quite. We
Right.
both sort of jumped up at that.
So does journalism cover, a bit of TV and radio, and vice versa? Does TV and radio cover a bit of journalism, or are they quite defined?
We do like TV and radio programs, but it's like news-based ones, whereas Josh's just stays away from most journalism, and it's all
Okay.
about how to be a good TV and radio sort of presenter and
Yeah.
producer.
Although we do have to go out and do like packages, like not news packages, but like magazines show style packages, like you'd get on the one show maybe. So
Okay.
there's a little bit of an overlap.
So if you could pick out, like now, as in the current landscape, if you could both pick out like your perfect job, what do you think it would be?
Oh gosh,
Oh.
really starting us off early. Wow.
Have you got one? Because
I know it's a bit early, but maybe just like a broadcast assistant or a production role. I know it's cliche, but like Radio 1, like the stations that you'd listen to growing up, like obviously
Yep.
those are like your dreams, but yeah, something like that along the lines. What about you?
probably a producer, radio producer.
Okay.
Because I've just like, since I did Shock, because I did like a journalism course because I really love radio, but I didn't really like TV. And I thought, well, if I do journalism, then I've got a media degree, but then I can also do a load of radio on the side. So that's how I sort of fell in love with doing all the producery bits, is through Shock. So I'd probably like to go and do that in the real world.
And what is it you prefer about radio compared to TV?
I feel like it's more of a personal medium. I don't know why, but I just feel like I have a lot more fun and I find it a lot less scary as well. Because if you put me in front of a TV camera, I look like a deer in headlights, whereas behind a mic, I'm usually okay.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it, really. I think that's exactly what most people in radio would say, that actually it is. It is so much more personal, and so much quicker in lots of ways. I mean, TV production takes so much time to really go through any moment of broadcast, whereas with radio you can almost just think of an idea and just run with it and just go with it. You could think of an idea during a song playing and then within a couple of minutes you're doing it, you know. So it's immediate and it's definitely personal. You are literally just having a chat with someone, really, aren't you?
I just quite like the fact that I don't have to like wear nice clothes. I can just come in like joggers and like no one can see.
True. It's very true. I've got joggers on right now. I'm just back from the gym, and it's definitely best that it's radio.
Well, Neptune Radio in Dover and Folkestone, that was your first sort of radio job. But moving on, where was next for you after that?
Well, while I was doing Neptune, I started kind of approaching other stations at the same time. So while I was doing Neptune, I then started doing Saturday afternoons in Cambridge on Q103, and I was doing a bit of Essex FM. So I'd already sort of started putting myself out and doing a bit more other stuff. That led to Southern FM, which was one of the stations that I grew up listening to. So it meant quite a lot to me. That was the home area kind of station, and it was a big station, and it was. I looked up to the people that were on it, and it was a big thing. That was proper nerves doing that first link. It was a Saturday breakfast show I did first, and that was, it was a nerve-wracking thing to be on the station that, you hear it everywhere, like, where you grow up. It was just one of those stations that was on in every cafe, every taxi, it was just everywhere. So you knew also, I think it's probably a slightly different feeling because the people that you grew up with, your school friends, your whole life, because I grew up in Sussex, I was born there, and I'd spent all that time there, and there I was at 21, so I knew a lot of people, and you think, God, they're going to be listening. So it was a different experience to somewhere like Cambridge, where you were on, and it was great, but the home area one was always quite a big deal. So it was lovely to be on Southern, and that was about a year and a half. I did that until going up to Manchester to Galaxy.
I think there is something quite special about being on your home station, though, because if either of us ever got to do that, then that would be very special.
It's a unique thing because you're talking about an area that you know really, really well. You're doing the travel news sometimes about like your hometown, and you know exactly what you're talking about and where you're talking about. And like I say, there's people that that are probably listening, and connections of the family that are listening. I think it's quite a nice thing for people that to hear you on the radio actually as well. It's probably quite nice for them to have a familiar person the other end.
I mean, we were speaking to Danny Milo a few episodes back, and you're making the exact same point about like how you can talk about like a certain roundabout or a certain landmark that will like resonate with certain listeners because they're from the local area and they'll know what you're talking about, which is really important, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's on hometown station now. I guess
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah,
I think it is.
with Yorkshire. Yeah, it's a nice thing. It's a nice thing. It's it was a really good move, I think, that one, and it was a hard decision to leave it actually because it was a great station, but. You just, I don't know, when you're 21, you just kind of feel like you need to be constantly moving on to the next thing, really.
So you mentioned Galaxy and moving to Manchester. So talk a little bit about that and how, I mean, Galaxy was massive. Every person that we've spoken to had appeared on Galaxy at some point.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So how did it feel to be on a station like Galaxy?
Well, it was musically, it was my thing. So it was dance and R&B, and that was my thing. So that in itself, like I remember doing my first show on Galaxy 102 in Manchester, and that again, it's that when you're at that point, like things like being on in a city make a difference, as well, because obviously Southern FM is sort of Brighton, Eastbourne, that kind of thing. But to be on in a big city, one of the big cities i.e. Manchester, had a different feeling about it. And being on a station playing Darude, Sandstorm during the day, and Dr. Dre and stuff like that was like, this is great. Like, and the energy of it, and it was such an amazing brand with the whole brand values of Galaxy were just amazing. And like you say, that was one of those stations that everybody was just listening to again. It was everywhere in Yorkshire, Manchester. It was huge. And yeah, very, very exciting time to be part of that.
Darude Sandstorm, what a tune. I haven't
Yeah,
heard about that in ages. Gosh.
No,
Yeah.
I don't know why that came to mind actually, but yeah, the stuff like that. It was just, the playlist was brilliant. The production, the feel of it, the energy. It was perfect. For somebody at, well, I guess 22, I was at that point. Just absolutely spot on.
And after sort of being at Galaxy in Manchester, did you go to the network after that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so I did a year or so on mornings in Manchester, and then it was a boss that I worked with at Southern, who had a brilliant guy from New Zealand called Andrew Jeffries, full of energy and enthusiasm and ideas, and just a really inspirational person to work for. So he was with me at Southern, and then he went up to Glasgow, I think it was, to Beat 106, and to launch that, and then I can't remember the exact order, but I think he went to Galaxy after Kerrang, and then phoned me up and said, do you want to come over and do the late show on the network? And I thought, well, that sounds like fun. So moved across from Manchester to Leeds to do that, and it was good fun. That it was a good fun show to do with a daily chart, and Galaxy. Galaxy being great.
How did it feel going from obviously like the local stations back home to suddenly being on a national scale? How did that feel for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one with radio, isn't it? Because in your head you're going, oh, that's a big network of stations. That's a lot of cities now. Suddenly, that's Newcastle and Bristol and Leeds and Sheffield and Manchester and Birmingham. It was on in a lot of places, and that's, I guess, what's appealing at that moment when you think, do I want to go and do that? Yes, I do. That sounds great. Of course, the reality of it is that actually you're still doing the same thing. This is the weird thing with radio, is that you're still doing the same thing. It almost doesn't matter how many people are listening in that sense, because you're still doing the same thing, whether there's 3 million people listening or 300. You're doing the same thing. But it's always nice to know in the back of your mind that lots of people are listening. So yeah, it was great. It was a good move and a really fun time doing that in Leeds. And I ended up Leeds being quite significant in my life, really, because I ended up staying there, living in Leeds for quite a few years before going to London, and then ended up, when I came back from Canada, and I'm jumping ahead massively here, but then I ended up coming back to Leeds again. After coming back from Canada years and years later. So it's been quite a significant part of my life, really.
I was going to say, you live in Yorkshire still, don't you?
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah, which I have done for, it's probably this time round getting on for about, 10, 12 years, something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy.
After that, so what happened? So your time at Galaxy came to an end. So where did you end up after that?
So I got let go from Galaxy at the end of that contract, which was the first time that had happened. That was a bit hard to deal with because it had never happened before. But and it's not the nicest thing, and it just unfortunately is one of those things within this business that you're on contracts and you just never really know what's going to happen. But so that came to an end, and I ended up going to TFM, which is Teesside, for EMAP. It was Bauer at that point. I think it was Bauer. Can't remember. EMAP or Bauer. So went to TFM, which was the Northeast, and did about a year there, and then in that time got the phone call saying, "Do you want to come to do Heart in London?" And it was like, yes, I do. So yeah, that was like, I mean, all through that time. You know, this is the thing, isn't it? You try and build it up and go to the next thing and keep things moving forward. And the big goal, even from starting out in radio, even from like Neptune, the big end goal was to get to London, and so that was the moment. Really, that was the kind of there you go. It's finally happened, which was amazing. So that meant a hell of a lot to end up going to do a London show.
Did you imagine yourself suddenly going from Galaxy to TFM, then to Heart, like just jumping around all the different stations?
No, not really. I mean, it's such a, there's so many ups and downs, I suppose, along the way. And there was a lot going on in that TFM year where I'd been approached by Radio 1 to do the top 40. And there was a big process with that in terms of, again, lots of interviews with different people, and then I ended up eventually doing a pilot at Radio 2 to I think I don't know the exact details, but down to the last few to do that, and that didn't happen. And then Kiss, I was doing auditions for Kiss and for Capital all that year, weirdly, and none of those quite came off at that time. Heart was the first one to come through, which is the one that I probably wasn't necessarily expecting to happen, because it was, I'd been going from playing sort of, Darude and Dr. Dre, and then suddenly, to Heart, where at that point they were playing Randy Crawford and Whitney Houston quite a lot. Whitney Houston and, all that kind of stuff, which I thought was going to be a bit of a struggle. And I mean, to be honest, it probably was. For the first couple of weeks or so on Heart, when it was probably a bit of an adjustment, but eventually just kind of got it and just got the right sort of tone and pace and all that kind of stuff by listening to what all the other people on there were doing, really, and just and sort of absorbing myself in it, which I've really learnt you can do, actually. When it comes to formats, I would say go for any format, because you can absorb yourself in almost anything, and once you've done it for a while, you really start to appreciate different stuff and actually like some of the stuff that you're playing, and just you end up sort of really getting knowledgeable about it because you're researching stuff, and it's quite a nice thing. I quite like that, of just sort of throwing yourself into a format that's a bit different, that you might not have necessarily thought was your thing. And it's amazing how you can adapt.
And I suppose there are lots of different overlaps with all of the different station types, regardless of whether they're playing Darude Sandstorm or Whitney Houston, like you said.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I mean, the principles are kind of the same, really, in that obviously the target audience that you're talking to is going to be different depending on the station, in terms of, it could be 1534s, or it could be, 1545s. It could be a wide range. It could be a really niche or a really defined age that you're talking to. But the principles are the same, that you just need to know who your audience is, what they like, what they don't like, what kind of people they are, what their lives are like. The more information you know about your target audience, the better, because then you can basically talk to them and talk about the stuff that they're interested in. And that kind of is what it's all about. And that could, as you say, rightfully so, you could be on any format. It's the same thing. You just need to know who it is you're talking to and talk to them.
While you were at Heart, it was taken over by Global, wasn't it?
Yes.
And am I right in saying there was an incident where Richard Park and Ashley Tabor may have appeared at a point which you didn't expect them to?
Yes, they did. They appeared. They'd bought the stations. I think. Actually, was it? I think it was. They'd bought what was Heart London, Heart Birmingham, and I think the station in Nottingham, which I can't remember what it was called at that point. I think it was that. So they bought Heart, yeah. And so I was on air doing the evening show, and then the door opened, and in came Richard and Ashley, and I'd never met either of them before. So I was in the middle of the travel news and then saw them, and you know that just that moment of like gulping and just like almost panic. But you're on air, so it's not like you can sort of calm yourself down because you're trying to get through the travel news at the same time. So I wrapped that up pretty quick, and then they came in and had a chat, and they were lovely, absolutely brilliant. And then unfortunately the reception phoned at that point onto the XD and said, your pizza's arrived, because I'd ordered a takeaway pizza, and for whatever reason my brain that day said, oh, my pizza's arrived, I'm going to have to go. Like, it was just absolutely insanity. And everybody afterwards was like, yeah, but surely you could have just like left the pizza waiting like for. Yes, of course I could have done that, and that's absolutely what I should have done. But for whatever reason, that's not what I did, and I've no idea why. But that was mortifying. Yeah, when you look back on.
2 questions. What type of pizza was it, and was it a good pizza?
I think it was probably something with chilies on it, because that does tend to be my thing. It was a really good pizza, actually. There was one, it was somewhere in West London, and it was like a proper Italian restaurant. And it, probably with chilies and I can't remember the other bits, but it definitely would have had chilies on it.
My spice tolerance couldn't handle that, I don't think. I don't know about
No?
you.
Oh no, mine's terrible. No.
You can build that up a bit, I think, over time, because mine used to be, and then I think you just, well, either that or you just kill off all your taste buds. I don't know what you do. I don't know if it's tolerance or just killing off your taste.
There's a podcast there and just talking to people about their pizza toppings. Maybe that's for another time.
Yeah.
It's like a radio feature. So you at heart you did stuff for London Frequency, and you also did Club Classics, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So I did 4 years on evenings, and then I did sort of Club Classics and sort of cover stuff during the week, which was great. And that was when Club Classics, that was when it started. That was when they started to sort of expand out the network. So that was, just going on more and more stations, quite rapidly, really. But Club Classics was an absolutely, it's still going, that, isn't it? It's a very iconic show, and that was there from literally the day I joined. Club Classics was on, and that was back in 2004. So that's been running a really long time. It's just such a great name, isn't it? Still that's still going. But that was a good old time doing Club Classics, and doing a lot of DJing around that as well, which was nice because it was such a good brand, the Club Classics brand. So we all went out doing like a Club Classics tour. It was me, Toby, a guy called Chris Farrell, and we used to go out and basically do a different nightclub on like a rota thing. So we did one week each, and then we'd go and do one of the sort of big ranked leisure clubs around London, and take the Club Classics to do it there. That was good fun. And then we did a few like New Year's Eve at Tiger on the Haymarket and stuff like that. So that was fun. That was good times.
How was it going to all of these different clubs and seeing like your listeners? Was it like a nice reaction, would you think?
Yeah, it was. I don't think I've ever necessarily been like, I don't know if live DJing was ever really my thing. Like I did it, and it was good fun. There were certainly times when it was like really good fun. But I don't think I was the best at it by any means. But it was, it was good. It was good fun. It's always good to see who you're talking to and meet the listeners and hear from the listeners, because it gives you some good ideas about the kind of stuff they're interested in or talking about, or the kind of things that happen and what they do. And it was great. It was definitely a good thing to do.
So after that, I believe at this point you went to Dubai.
Yeah, I went to Channel 4 in Dubai. Yep, which was, well, there was a bit where I went from the Heart Network, and then I went to the Heart Brighton Sussex station for a year, which was effectively what was Southern FM. So that had become Heart in that time. So I went back because it was like hometown station, and I did that for a year, and then that came to an end, and then I thought, right, not much else going on at that point, so I'll go to Dubai. So and it was something that had been in the back of my mind for a little while because it always felt quite appealing. My brother had lived in Dubai for a bit, and he said good things about it, and I thought, do you know what, it's probably feels like the right time to go and try that. So so I went into Dubai for a year, which was a completely different experience, but a really good experience, and it opened your eyes to the fact that the world is out there, and actually there's so many different places you can go, different things you can do, and that was a good thing because I don't think I'd really necessarily considered that before, moving to a different country, and actually it's quite nice when your eyes open to that and you see the world and think of, all the options that are out there. Actually, it's a good thing.
Were there any cultural differences in terms of radio from moving from the UK to a different country, Dubai?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably depends on which company and which network. I mean, I was always really impressed with the other network, which was Virgin and Dubai 92. They were really good at branding and the whole thing. It was really, really polished. They were a great network. I didn't work for that one. I worked for a different one. But I think it depends on probably who you work for and what the environment's like and what the outlook is. I mean, there was a lot that was good at Channel 4, and we did some quite good stuff. I ended up becoming assistant program controller while I was there. So we implemented quite a lot of changes with music, and really got that very, very defined and really high rotations, which I think it needed at that point because it was quite loose and nobody probably could really understand quite what it was or what it was meant to be doing. So we just got really back to playing the hits and just high rotations and keeping things a bit simple, just going sort of back to a few basics to get it back on track a bit. So there were quite a lot of changes, but I think we achieved quite a lot, and I think it all sounded quite good, and it was lovely being on air somewhere different like that, and it was great living there. It was a really, really good experience, and I think for me personally, a year felt about right to be there. But I know people that have been there for 15, 20 years, and there's a lot to be said for it. It's very, very low crime, and a lovely place to live. I mean, the weather for the majority of the year is great. It can get too hot for for a good few months of the year. It can be just a bit unpleasantly hot. But life could be a lot worse, I think, than living somewhere like that. Yeah.
I think I'd rather it be too hot than just pouring it down all the time.
There is that argument, isn't there? Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been, but I remember the ocean, like the sea, being really weirdly warm. Like even the water was really weirdly warm, and everything was just hot, and air conditioning everywhere because you just couldn't not. So even bus shelters had air conditioning. It was and it's a unique place, Dubai, isn't it? I mean, it's definitely unique. And it has its quirks, that's for sure. But there's a lot of good stuff that goes on, and a lot of quite impressive things that they do there, really.
So you said that you stayed there for just about a year. What was next after Dubai?
Well, Dubai, as I say, it kind of really opened my eyes to the fact that it doesn't have to be the UK. There are other places and other things you can do, and so I knew really when I'd been at Dubai for sort of even 6-7 months, I kind of knew that after that I wanted to go somewhere else again. And I was sort of torn between New Zealand, Australia, America, Canada. Like they were all kind of buzzing around as somewhere that I could go to. My brother at that point then lived in America, in New York. So I was going for it with Canada. I did go to New Zealand, actually. I went to New Zealand and chatted to a few radio people as well. I do love New Zealand. But that didn't seem to really come through particularly. But I was sending stuff out to stations in Canada at the same time. And I actually got a few offers. There was one from a station in Alberta. he seemed like a really nice guy. But it was quite a small station. And then there was an offer from Montreal, which was a station at that point called Q92, and they were going to be basically rebranding as The Beat, and so that whole big sort of rebrand going on with new production, new music, new imaging, and marketing, and lots of billboards and all the rest of it. And it was quite an exciting time actually to jump in and be part of that, because I think Q92 had been on air for many, many years, and it sort of maybe just got a bit stale, and they needed to freshen it up. So that was really, really exciting to be offered that, and for them to then help me with the visa, to get the visa to go and be able to work in Canada, which there were many times I was thinking, is this actually going to happen? Is this going to happen? And I'd sort of quit Dubai and was just hoping that would come off and the visa would all work out. Otherwise, I didn't really have anything else at that point. So, yeah, and it did, and it came off, and moved out there September 2011, I think it was, yeah. And it was amazing. It was such a good experience. Totally different from Dubai, but another great thing to do.
How different is radio over there in Canada compared to back in the UK?
It's quite different. There were quite a few differences, certainly in Montreal, because of the French. It's predominantly French speaking. It's Quebecois in Montreal, and so there's a lot of actually laws for language just in general actually in Montreal, in terms of, you say bonjour, hi. If you're greeted somewhere, if you go to get a coffee or whatever, it's bonjour, hi. Everywhere's bonjour, hi. And so it's French first, and that has impacts on the radio as well. So they're relatively closely monitored in terms of music. There's French stations and there's English stations, but I think the French stations have a need to play a certain amount of French Canadian music, and so what they did was they forced the English stations to play CanCon, which is Canadian content. So that could actually be anything. That could be Bryan Adams or Michael Bublé, or Celine Dion, or it could be that there's a drummer who played on that song from whoever it might be, and that counts for CanCon. So you have to play a certain amount of CanCon, but because it's Montreal, you also had to play a certain amount of non-hits, so that you basically wouldn't completely trash the French stations, which were having to play the certain amount of French stuff. So it always felt a bit like, and that was 2011, and it always felt a little bit to me like that was at a time when apps were coming through, and I think smartphones and internet certainly was there, and you think, God, that's quite a that's almost like having your hands tied behind your back, really, isn't it? Because you've got to do this stuff, and yet out there, from a listener point of view, they can almost listen to anything. So why would they choose to listen to stuff that isn't familiar to them, or whatever it might be? It felt a little bit of a disadvantage, but equally, they're protecting the French stations, and they're making sure that there's Canadian content coming through, and so there's obviously pros and cons to that, but yeah, that was one of the big differences. The other huge difference is that they have a different audience measuring system. So obviously in the UK it's RAJAR, which is basically a tick box scenario, and in Canada it was PPM, which I think was people wearing a device, I think like a pager type device, and it would effectively pick up on when they were listening and what they were listening to, and then it would record that data. So a completely different system. But what that meant was that it wasn't a recall system like RAJAR. So with RAJAR, people are ticking boxes. So the idea is that you need to be top of mind for when people tick those boxes, because it might be that they're ticking the box at a point where they're not actually even listening to the radio at that moment. They just thought, oh, hang on a minute, it's the end of the day. What did I listen to on the radio today? And then they go through the thing and tick some boxes. And so the idea is that you need to be top of mind for whenever it is that they get to that, which is why we have to hammer home the idents of the station, and people need to know what they're listening to, because they need to remember it, for later. Whereas with PPM, it doesn't make any difference because they're listening to it and it's recording when they're listening to it. So it doesn't actually matter if you keep telling people what the station is, apart from just having some brand awareness and obviously people connecting to that brand, but you don't need to hammer it home quite as much. So when I first got there and I first started doing the show, I couldn't believe it. I was like, hang on a minute, we've gone like 15 minutes without IDing the station. It's just like you'll go from one song straight to the next, and that for me was a completely alien concept without an ID. And I've gone through like 3 or 4 of these, and I was like, this can't be right. This must be a mistake. And it was like, no, that's fine. You keep the music flowing and blah, blah, blah. And I obviously figured out that it was because it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter so much. And I suppose if you don't need to absolutely hammer it home, then it probably is a slightly nicer listen. It feels less cluttered if you're just going from song to song to song, But in the UK, you probably wouldn't want to take that risk because you need to make sure the brand awareness is there,
That would actually freak me out if I heard 3 songs back to back without an ID.
Would it? Yeah, it did me. Yeah. Yeah, it's a completely alien concept, that really, isn't it? Because it was weird. It was weird. But then you get used to it, you get used to whatever it is, don't you? And then it felt weird to come back and play idents every song, and But yeah, there were quite a few differences, really, in terms of the radio there compared to here. But and there's all sorts of different tricks and things with PPM. Like I think the reason why they keep the music going as much as possible, or having always sort of production underneath you, like you'd always pretty much have something underneath you when you're talking. And I think it's because the PPM meters sometimes struggled a bit if it had gone from music to voice and then music again, and it would so there was a theory that if you kept the music going the whole time, the PPM picked it up better. So all that kind of stuff. But it was a great station. It was a really, really, really good station. Good people and a fantastic time, and great to be broadcasting somewhere just completely different like that. And again, it's that thing of absorbing yourself. I mean, I mentioned it earlier as a kind of format thing, but equally in a new area or a new country, it's amazing how quickly you can adapt and start to absorb all this information. And probably in your first month or so, you sound like a complete idiot because you don't know what you're talking about, and you don't know how to pronounce things, and you don't know. I was using a lot of very British words like jumper because I couldn't believe it because it was so freaking cold, because it was like minus 35 at points in Montreal, and I couldn't believe that I'd done some washing, put my jumper out, and it had frozen, like it was just absolutely solid. So I did a link about it on air saying, I can't believe. But of course, there's 2 things with that. Number one, they live with this all the time, right? That they're used to it being that cold. It's just normal. But to me, it obviously wasn't. And secondly, nobody knew what a jumper was. So I had to,
sweatshirt, isn't it? Oh.
Yeah, sweater, yeah. But they didn't have a clue what I was talking about. So that whole link must have sounded really, really strange to them. Like, who the hell is this? But, that's what I mean. Eventually, you just start to absorb yourself in it, and you get used to it, and you get used to what words you need to use. Like, I wouldn't have used bin because they wouldn't have known what that was. So, you can sound British, and of course, they like generally speaking, the accent over there goes down quite well. But it just means thinking about some of those words that just make that they would just go over their head. So, trash, sweater, those sorts of words, but in a British accent, and then you're all good.
Have you picked up any vocabulary from your time there that you just suddenly start using in British life now?
Well, it took me a while to adjust back, actually, because what started to happen is actually a lot of those words started to sound really twee to me, like flat, even like a flat. What is that? Compared to an apartment or something. I don't know. It just started to all sound, because I've been away for about 3 years by that point, and Dubai was, relatively Americanized, I guess, in some ways, in terms of the way they'd use some words as well. So it'd been quite a long time being away, and things like bin just sounded so twee when I came back to it. So yeah, it took a bit of adjustment coming back at the same time as well. It did, actually, thinking about it. It did take a bit of adjustment. Yeah. It's amazing how you get used to stuff, isn't it?
And Brits seem to do pretty well over there. I mean, Greg Burns is over there currently, and he's doing
He
pretty
is.
well.
Yeah, he is. He's doing great. He's a good friend actually, and he was with me at Heart when I started on Heart, and he was doing drive time, and I was doing the evenings. So known him a very, very long time, and yeah, he's doing great over there. He's Toronto, and seems to be loving it.
So you said that you moved back from the travels around the world afterwards. What made you want to come back to the UK, and where did you end up going?
Yeah, so it got to, well, there's so many reasons really for it when you look back. I mean, I've been away for 3 years at that point, and that felt like about right. And I just kind of wanted to come home. But I don't know if I was just actually, in hindsight, going through a bit of a kind of homesickness time, and probably would have been okay if I just stayed and stuck it out. But at that point, I was just going through a bit of a sort of, I just kind of wanted to come home. Nobody could understand why I wanted to. And there are definitely times when I look back and go, yeah, why did I do that? That was strange. But I just wanted to come home. But I think also there were, I was having French lessons and I was doing okay with it. I definitely, I'd had the radio station had paid for me to have French stations. So this teacher came into the radio station every week, and I had a French lesson. And I was getting somewhere with it, and it was going quite well, really. But the language thing was a bit of a challenge, and it worried me a bit because when I was there were sort of all kinds of things about, if you don't speak French, you might be denied hospital treatment, and not aimed at me, but it was in the newspapers and stuff, and that was what was buzzing around. And there were complications, I suppose, with language there, and it worried me that if I ever got let go from the radio station, that actually, unless I spoke really, really good French, I wouldn't be able to really get many other jobs in Montreal. So that worried me quite a lot. So I just thought, well, it's going to be a difficult one to commit to unless I get really super good at French. And it just felt like, I don't know, that was a bit of a risk, really. But in hindsight, it probably would have been okay, somehow. But, I mean, I could have stayed and then got a permanent residence visa, and then I could have moved to somewhere else. But then I didn't necessarily want to move to just some other random place because I quite liked Montreal. Anyway, it just felt like the right time to come home. So I was looking out for what was around and speaking to a few people, and Radio Air in Leeds had an opening for middays for 10 till 2. And I knew Leeds well, and I liked the programme director, a guy called Ewan McMorrow. He was great, and Owen Ryan, who was the group PD, and I liked both of them. And I thought, you know what, let's go and do that. And yeah, went back and started doing Radio Air.
Radio Air was such an iconic station, though, because I think a lot of people, especially in the Leeds area, wanted to get to Radio Air.
Yeah, I mean, it's been there a long, long time, and a lot of people have worked on it, and it's got an incredible history. I mean, it struggled a bit at times, but it was cool. I mean, it was, I knew what I was going to, as it were. I knew the station, and it had the backing of the group and the music and the production, and I thought it sounded pretty good, actually. So yeah, back to Radio Air, and then started doing some Magic cover and weekends sort of towards the end of my year there.
So Magic, you've been there for quite a long time now. How is it? How's it going? How was it to start working there?
Yeah, it was amazing. I always loved Magic from listening to it. I always just thought it was a really special station, and I'd wanted to be on Magic for a really, really long time, and it was amazing to do it. Yeah, it was Steve Parkinson, who I'd worked with at Heart before. He was there, and in a bigger Bauer role, and Sheena Mason, who's still there now, who's amazing. And just a lovely, lovely station, lovely people. And and just lovely listeners, like just a really all round, just really, really great place to be. And I really enjoyed doing it. I loved it. And it sort of changed over the years many times in terms of what I've done there. But in terms of being part of it, it's been, I've been part of it for getting on for 12 years, which is incredible.
That's crazy. That's like half my life.
It is crazy. Oh, is it? Oh, no, don't. Yeah, when you put it like that. Yeah. But it's been brilliant. I love Magic. I've always loved it. And it's changed a lot in those times in terms of formats and music and presenters and everything else. But, it's so on form at the moment. It's so on form. I think it sounds absolutely phenomenal because it's changed quite recently with the production and the presenters and the music as well. And I think it sounds really, really good, really fresh. I think it's great.
Say it's a very good time to be at Magic.
It is 100%.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially with the
very exciting.
Magic Classical now from Scala Radio, it just seems a lot nicer. I really like listening to it sometimes.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I think I genuinely think Bauer are making some absolutely incredible decisions. Like every decision that they seem to make at the moment in terms of people coming in and presenters and the positioning of the stations, and it all just seems to make a lot of sense.
I was going to say, with like Gabby Roslin, Nikki Chapman, Mel Gedroich, it seems to be, it's definitely, Magic has come back on my radar.
Great.
So the branding's working.
Great, that's really good to hear. Yeah, good. And that's exactly what needs to be happening, really. So those presenters have put it back on your radar.
So you also do a bit of work at Virgin at the moment with that. How's that going for you?
Yeah, great. Lovely to be part of that as well. Mike Cassie runs it, is great. And Stuart, who runs the sort of, the children anthems and 80s plus, he runs those stations, another really good guy. So great people, great studios. Oh my goodness, the studios are phenomenal. I don't know if you've ever been into that News UK building, but it's like it's next to the Shard and you've got the views as if you were in the Shard. And the studios are lovely, and it just has a great feel to it. So that's a very seriously impressive building.
I've been in, Josh hasn't, and it's very very nice.
Yeah. Did you what did you think in terms of compared to other studios and stuff?
It seems like I love the Virgin part of it, where it's just, I feel like it's plonked in the middle of the office, but it works. Whereas at where else have I been? At Global, I'd say everything's really tight and every corner's used. So it was a different feel.
Yeah, Global, I suppose there's just so much in that building now compared to when they moved in, when they first moved there. I suppose there's just so much more going on now, isn't there?
So, Paul Hayes, you've had a varied career and it's been a brilliant one. But if you could go back to the start of it all and give yourself one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
God, that's a good question. What have other people said?
Oh, everyone's given a bit of a different answer to this. When we had Dave Kelly, I think he said something like, "Don't give up."
Yeah, along those lines.
Yeah. Do you know what I probably actually would say is enjoy all the moments, and that's probably something as a life thing that you learn later on in life, maybe a bit better. But it's so easy when you're caught up in it all and when it's all happening at the time to just sort of go along with it and not necessarily sit back and go, not that you want to sit there, admiring yourself, but just every now and again it's nice to go, oh, this is really great, I'm really loving this, and this is that grateful gratitude sort of attitude stuff is really good. And yeah, I would say just enjoy those every moment, because it's amazing. This sounds like I'm so old saying this, but it's amazing how quickly time goes. And you look back and you're like, no, it's true. And you look back and you go, my God, like all that amazing stuff. And it just feels like an absolute whirlwind. But yeah, enjoy every moment. That's it.
It's very sweet. Well, Paul Hayes, thank you very much for coming on My Career So Far. It has been a pleasure. Yeah, thank you for coming on.
You're very welcome. Lovely to talk to you both.